I am joined today by Gareth James from MTT Poker School, and I'm a big fan of Gareth's because I think he is the guy to follow on Twitter for learning how to learn poker. He doesn't just tell you sort of how to play a hand. In fact, he rarely does that, from what I can tell. He tells you how to go about studying a hand. Would you say that is accurate, Gareth? Welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I don't. I mean, it's not very helpful to give you the answer all the time. Um, I mentioned to you before when we were chatting before the recording about like it's like the answers at the back of the maths textbook, right? That you could put the answer down. You're not going to really learn too much if you just go straight for the answers. Guiding you to the answer, like how to study, how to train, how to approach a spot, what to think about, what kind of questions to ask yourself to get to the answer is going to be a lot more useful when you study and when you play, because then you can actually use those, use that learning to become a better player when you're at the table.
So we're going to go for a hand that I played today, and I think I'm getting into a good rhythm of asking pretty decent questions. I will be asking these questions as we go through the review, but generally speaking, when you play a hand, what questions are you asking yourself? What reliable questions should we all be asking ourselves when we look at a hand?
I mean, it's quite a broad question. So, I mean, it depends what the situation is. Uh, like I know from this spot, spoiler, the cutoff's going to open and we've got a decision in the small blind, but it's already a decision point, right? So what we want to do and how we're going to approach it, what kind of hands we want to call, what kind of hands we want to three bet. Are there any hands that we want to jam? Um, in this particular example, there's only four players worth of antes. Does that have an effect on pre-flop ranges? There's only four players at the table. Does that ever affect things? What's the baseline? How am I going to approach this spot what's the starting point? And are there any reasons why I might want to do something differently based on the player's opening or the player's left to act?
So we'll jump straight into the hand. This is a hand that I played on party poker. There's absolutely no reads whatsoever. In fact, I think this is the first hand I played when I late regged into this tournament. Um, and as we can see, so very first decision point, we've got 10 jacks suited. Is a pretty hand. We're out of position. And we've got a cutoff open. Now I immediately think we could go one of two ways here, Gareth. But what's your first instinct?
Uh, I feel like a lot of recreational amateur players will look at it and think, oh, isn't it? It's a pretty hand. We can just call and play multi-way. We don't want to, play a big pot out of position with Jack high. But I think this is a quite a nice candidate to three bet. You don't just want to be three betting your best hands. You want to three bet some playable hands like this one as well. So I quite like a three bet here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a call either.
I did call, but I was very surprised when I looked at the GTO Wizard Rangers. And I have seen people talk about this once before. That this is the Jack 10 suited specifically is
Hmm.
mostly a 40 big blind shove.
Okay.
And I've seen this before. In fact, I've seen if memory serves me, I think if you ever saw that hand where Daniel Negreanu threw a selfie stick, I think David Peters did this exact thing to him with Queen 10 suited at sort of 30 or 40 big blinds effective. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of get it with Jack 10 suited, and like I get why Jack 10 suited might be the bluff hand to do it with. It can make most straights and the best straights, and it does well against say if called by a smaller pair and stuff. But what's the rationale there, Gareth? 40 big
I
blind
mean,
shove?
so yeah, I mean, I think this is a really good question because this is the kind of like, the why. You can always look at a solver. It's not going to give you the why. So you've got to try and work that out. I talk about this in my book, The Final Table, where you're like, try and work out the logical reasons why the solver's doing this. Now, when you shove Jack high, you can get ace high, king high, and queen high to fold. So you can get some better
Mm.
hands to fold straight away. You block some of the calling range. Okay. So if you wanted to, you could click the all in button and see what the calling range looks like. And then if it's like ace, jack, ace 10, okay, well, we block some of those hands. Yeah, so ace, let's have a look. Yeah, ace, jack off, ace 10 suited, right? You also block some jacks and tens. You've also got reasonable equity against some of the ace highs, sorry, the ace x hands and the king queen suited, and you're doing, reasonably well against nines, eights, sevens, and sixes. So there's always there's always going to be logical reasons why. It's just about trying to work that out. I mean, not to defend, I didn't talk about jamming, but in the exact spot I mentioned, there's only 4 players worth of antes. These sims are run for 8 players or like big blind ante. So when there's fewer antes in the middle, there's going to be less jamming. Also, we're playing slightly deeper than 40 big blinds as well. So I don't know if you wanted to, um, have a look at 50 big blinds and see if there's still some jamming. But
Yeah,
those would be that, when you're studying these spots, trying to work out the differences between, okay, what would I do at 50 big blinds? What would I do at 40 big blinds? That can be quite useful, I think.
yeah. There's no jamming at 50 big blinds, so
Uh,
that's
so that's just sorry, that's the button. If you just move across to
Oh, you're right. Sorry.
the it still might be. No, there isn't.
No,
Okay.
there's
So
no jam.
that's a pretty good learning point, right? So that the threshold for jamming certainly in Chippy V is at 40 bigs, 50 bigs becomes, more of a three. You can see like we're mainly three betting now with the Jack 10
Mm.
suited. But there is some calling in there as well.
So back to I've played it. It would have been a very interesting hand review if I'd literally just jammed and that was the end of the hand. I did call. Big blind got out of the way, and once again we've. I don't think this is a. There's a lot of spots where it's 100% check. I don't think this is one of them. I actually felt there was some merit to leading out. It's one of the reasons why I picked the hand out. So, do you check here as played, Gareth, or do you consider leading out?
Yeah, I mean, so there's one thing that would make me want to start leading is if I had a higher proportion of really strong hands, and I don't think that's going to be the case here,
Mm.
depending on where you start three betting from. But you probably, I mean, yeah, can we have a look at the pre-flop range? You can see whether use three betting tens and nines. That would be quite a good place to start. Like if you are missing tens and nines, then all of a sudden, yeah, you three betting those hands, then you don't have them, and so the only one is sixes, and even sixes three bets a little bit at the time. So it's unlikely you're going to have really strong hands. You got 10-9 suited, I guess, and some 8-7 suited. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the imposition player is going to have all the sets, quite a lot of two pair, or some two pair, and straights as well. So I think they're going to have a higher proportion of strong hands, and therefore that's going to make me want to check. And our equity is going to be weaker, I think, here. So I would just always check.
Which is what I did, and I was quite surprised that he checked behind. I felt this was a pretty good board to see bet in general. So before we move on to the turn, any thoughts on what does that tell you when he checks behind on a board like this?
So I think he's probably doesn't have overpairs and best 10x. I guess he could check some really strong hands, but I think his checking back range is going to be his check back range is going to be middling, sort of 9x or 6x hands, maybe some sevens and eights. So I feel quite, obviously we haven't seen the turn card yet, but at this stage, I feel quite happy with our exact hand,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
have a pretty good idea of what their range looks like as well.
As a general rule, I tend to think that when someone checks back in a situation like this, that they've got some sort of showdown value. So we don't want to be checking it down if we've got no showdown value is the general way I think about it. But yeah, I remember at this point feeling very happy with the hand. I when this turn card came, I didn't like it. I felt like he had a decent amount of Queen X in his range, like Queen Nine, for example, Queen Jack, hands like that. So I presume we were never leading the flop. I presume we're never leading the turn. In your view, Gareth?
See, I feel like quite a lot of Queen X would bet the turn. So you've got some Queen Jack and Queen 10, for example. Yes, you can have some Queen 9. And there could even be some like Queen 8, Queen 7. I think it's like a overcard and a gut shot on the flop would be a pretty reasonable check.
Mm.
But I think my guess is, I mean, maybe we can look in the solver, but my guess is that he's got a sort of higher proportion of the 9x and 6x hands, or like the 8s and 7s, that we could get value from, but are always just going to check back on this turn and try and get to a river. So I would see bet here,
Yeah,
small fairly frequently.
yeah. He's got a lot of 9x as you suggested, and yes, the solver likes to lead out here. Too. My hand specifically, it doesn't do very well because obviously it's less likely to get called by hands that it beats now because of the queen. But as you said, that there is a lot of leading out. In fact, yeah, 35% of the time. Um, as played, I checked. He fires a half pot bet, and I'm obviously still very happy with my hand in general. I've got a a decent second pair. I've got an up and down straight draw. Um, I block I block some hands like King Jack. So I'm still very happy with my hand. But as played, do you what's your strategy here?
Yeah, so we have a hand that is just falls firmly in the middle, and generally speaking, you don't want to be raising or folding hands that fall in the middle. So you want to raise hands at the top and raise hands at the bottom, or maybe even fold hands at the bottom. But a hand that falls in the middle like this, like middle pair, straight draw, just very comfortable call. It's like it's not good enough to raise. You don't get um, enough worse hands to call or better hands to fold. It just doesn't make sense to turn his hand into a bluff. So it just firmly in the middle, just go for a call. Yeah.
Excellent. That's what I did. And then the river is very interesting. It's completed a flush. It's the king. It's likely going to complete a lot of two pairs and things like that. But it's also brought me a straight. Not straight either. Ace 10 would sorry, Ace Jack would be ahead of things now. I um uh, I'll ask you first. What are your thoughts on where we stand in this hand right now, and what would your strategy be?
Um, it's definitely a river card. I think is going to get checked back quite a lot. So I
Mm,
think there's always going to be this sort of temptation to want to bet so you can still get value from some worse hands. I think in practice, it's actually a pretty reasonable strategy. I'm not sure the solver would agree though, because your range is going to, like, if you just start leading this kind of hand or you lead your flushes on the river, your checking range becomes just so weak.
mm,
Also, like, you could check this kind of hand in order to induce the imposition player to bluff, but a lot of players really struggle to find enough bluffs for this line, like check back flop, bet turn, bet river, and might not even value bet thinly. I'm trying to think of what some weaker hands they could actually value bet here, because obviously a lot of flushes and straights are going to bet. But yeah, and then maybe the two pair type hands actually are too thin to bet. So those are the kind of the targets for you to get value from by betting. So
mm.
in Solverland, probably check, but against a player who is not going to find enough bluffs and is just going to call with some hands they maybe shouldn't, then I think betting could be good.
I think you nailed it on both parts actually there, Gareth. Because in Solverland, we check um, with pretty much everything, including our hand. Um, in reality, I did. I put out a small bet. And got called by I can't remember now. Oh, King Queen. Okay, so
Yeah.
he was actually yeah, he probably should have bet that on the flop actually, but it wouldn't have changed anything. Yeah, so I came to a similar conclusion to you. I felt like there was a lot of one pair and two pair hands that he's going to have in his range at this point that would definitely check back in a situation like this. I went for a small uh donk donk bet, what you call it. I felt like that was the sort of thing that would disencourage people to bluff raise me. I didn't want to get in a situation where someone had a set and re-raised, and then I find myself folding the best hand because they overvalued their hand. What do you think of the small bet size in there?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's fine. It'd be incredibly thin for a set to
Mm,
raise on the river when yeah, I mean, you're never betting the river with a worse yeah, I want to say, I mean, never say never, but like it's a dangerous word in poker. But I don't think you're ever going to lead like a worse set or two pair on the river. So and also not cool with it once you get raised. So it's very thin for them to raise a set in position here. So I think they would just call. And also we're never like I gotta use the word never again. We're very rarely gonna be in a spot against most sort of I don't know what level this is, but like lower mid stakes,
Yeah.
it's very tough to find somebody raise the river as a bluff here. So yeah, I don't think you will be in a tough spot. Like a weaker value hand isn't gonna raise, and I mean the only thing is that you will face some Jack X raises. So yeah, then
Yeah, this was
you
a
just spot.
$20 tournament, and I think I was probably not going to call if I did get raised there. People tend not to bluff in those situations. So that was a pretty interesting hand because technically everything I did was solver approved, but almost everything I did was the very occasional action. And the only time I felt I deviated from the solver was the river, which the solver likes to check. But as you suggested, in real life, people just don't have that many bluffs there to induce a bet. What would if I was to sort of go away and you were to give me a homework assignment, what would you advise me to do based on the way I played the hand? Because I probably took the more passive of two options each time, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the easy answer is to set up a drill for cutoff versus small blind, 50 big blinds effective, because the reason why we're doing that is, or the reason why I'm recommending that is it's clear that you have a pretty good idea of how to approach it, but it could be fine-tuned with just more reps
Mm.
in different boards. How often do you expect to see, you said the cutoff, you expect the cutoff to see that quite frequently. What about on different boards where they don't? What about boards where you do get to do some leading? We mentioned that right at the start when we looked at the flop. So yeah, I would do a lot of drills, and then I would review. What depends on what software you're going to use to do that. But reviewing the biggest mistakes and blunders, I think would be really really good, and developing a really good framework for playing this sport. Now, yeah, it happens less frequently than say cutoff versus big blind or button versus big blind, but I think a lot of players struggle from playing the small blind strategy because it is so different from the big blind. Like
Mm.
you don't have as wide a range from the small blind there. You do get to do some leading, a lot more leading. Well, you lead on boards that the big blind wouldn't. So I think that would be a
Mm.
good homework assignment. Yeah.
Um, he's the author of The Final Table. He's the founder of MTT Poker School, and he is one of the best guys to follow on Twitter if you want short, sharp lessons that will stick with you for a long time. So, Gareth James, thank you very much.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate it. Cheers.